about getting into regime change wars. I think Donald Trump is against that too. But here's the deal. Venezuela has been attempting to destroy not just us, but every country in this hemisphere. Maduro and Chavez before him were involved with an organization called the Foro de Sao Paulo, which is specifically designed to advance communist idealism throughout Latin and Central America in the post-Cold War world. When the Berlin Wall went down, Lula da Silva, the current president of Brazil, and Fidel Castro started this organization in 1990. Maduro is a protege of that organization, and Chavez was an organizer of it. Donald Trump taking these actions is, frankly, a real help for our country because we have to reassert ourselves in our own region. So we get right to the edge of some things, that bring up some constitutional matters. But it's about time that we try to set this straight as best we can with the influence we have without actually going to war. So it's just another step in that approach. And the Don Roe doctrine is moving forward.
Yep. And along those lines, here we have U.S. completes first sale of Venezuelan oil worth $500 million, officials say. So I know they were saying there was some type of split where a certain percentage was going to go to the Venezuelan people. Do you know what that split is? And
I don't know what the exact split is, but the plan here is that this money's going to be held for now on this sale. And then it'll get dispersed at some time in the future. And I haven't had a chance to catch up on the percentages, but Donald Trump's basic principle here, which he has stated and made very clear, is that all of the oil proceeds and revenue in Venezuela, which apparently has the largest proven reserves in the world for any country, including Saudi Arabia or the United States or Russia even, the proceeds have been going to drug trafficking. They've been going to fund a regime that the former president of which couldn't even get Venezuelans to protect him, so he brought in Cuban soldiers to protect himself. All these proceeds have been going to illicit activities of various sorts, mostly drug trafficking and suppressing the people of the country of Venezuela, which was once per capita had the greatest amount of gross domestic product of any country in North and South America. It's really breathtaking, its downfall. So Donald Trump wants to help restore that, and that's why you hear this talk about giving it back to the Venezuelan people. We'll see how that plays out. There's a lot more to go until that begins to roll out.
Yep. Well, moving on, more news out of Minnesota last night. A ICE-involved shooting took place, and we hear Kristi Noem was a busy girl this morning. She was on the news, on Fox News, doing press conferences, all types of stuff. But here she is. I'll let her tell the story because this clip, I think, does it pretty well on what took place in Minnesota.
Our agents were out doing what they're doing every single day across this country as they were doing targeted enforcement, going after individuals that are breaking federal law. When this individual drove away, crashed his car, tried to run into a home, and as they were wrestling on the ground trying to detain this individual, two other men came out of that building and started attacking him with weapons and shovels and brooms. And as it was 3-on-1, the agent feared for his life and defensively had to take action. But, this kind of violence is perpetuated by what we hear the governor saying, what we hear the mayor in Minneapolis saying, and their irresponsibility is extremely reckless. Governor Tim Walz has my phone number. I have called him and talked to him and said, listen, you let your city burn down in 2020. Don't do it again. President Trump wants to keep everybody safe. We're enforcing federal law. We're protecting every single American. Work with us. I want to remind you that Minneapolis itself, under the mayor's leadership and the governor's leadership, released almost 500 criminals out onto the streets rather than bring them to justice and turn them over to federal authorities. So they know they're releasing murderers and rapists and drug traffickers on the streets of Minneapolis. We're out there making sure they don't harm American citizens, and we're getting attacked while we do it. But we're going to continue to do our work and do what's right because it's what President Trump promised the American people.
All right. So she's been on the phone with Tim Walz asking for them to help and be a team, but it doesn't seem that they want to do that. They want the unrest. They want the people out there causing mayhem.
Well, and I'll tell you this. Keep in mind, this is the plan. This chaos is the plan. That's what Democrats are seeking to create, because their purpose is to change the American government. It's an attempted overthrow of the American ideal, because they do not want to constrain themselves to the U.S. Constitution. And by the way, it's hard enough to get Republicans to do it, much less Democrats. My goodness. But they are literally trying to undermine and overthrow the American government. That is their purpose. That is why they don't take action. That's why they don't talk to Kristi Noem. The lawlessness in this country, and Jacob Fry, the mayor of Minneapolis, and Tim Walz have tried to use this terminology to say it's lawless what Donald Trump's doing. No, actually, Donald Trump would be undermining his duty-bound responsibility, pardon, because of all the wind here, his duty-bound responsibility to uphold the law. These are laws on the books that ICE is enforcing. Joe Biden, on the other hand, was incredibly lawless. They did zero work on the border to stop mostly, criminal illegals and illegals of any sort from coming across the border. Donald Trump's cleaning up that lawlessness. The lawlessness is on Democrats. And yes, by the way, you're going to have ICE agents that do wrong things and maybe even very wrong things. But that's been honestly very, very rare. This is not a problem of ICE. I mean, it's a human institution. Errors can be made. But this has been a very effective and efficient effort that has been overseen not just by Kristi Noem, but by Tom Homan. They're doing what ought to be done. And every one of these Democrats that keeps calling out ICE and saying how criminal and illegal they are, they're liars. They're just flat out liars. It is the most legal thing for ICE to be doing what it is. And not just when it relates to criminal illegals, but all illegals. Every illegal here, whether they're committing crimes or not, are here illegally. It is a felony for them to be here illegally. So you could argue about whether you like, showing up at someone's house who's got a job and is not doing any harm or wrong. And I feel bad for them too. But the reality is they're not here under pretenses where they should be allowed. Yep. And in many cases, they're getting paid through welfare systems and government largesse, and then obviously the Somalia thing. So the corruption's on the Democrat side. The chaos and the violence is on Democrats. It's not on Republicans. It's definitely not on Donald Trump or ICE.
Yep. And here we have President Trump putting out a tweet along the lines, as you were talking, if the corrupt politicians in Minnesota don't obey the law and stop the professional agitators and insurrectionists from attacking the patriots of ICE who are only trying to do their job, I will institute the Insurrection Act. Insurrection Act, which many presidents have done before me, and quickly put an end to the travesty that is taking place in that once great state. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
Listen,
and
Democrats,
he wouldn't have to do this. Go ahead.
I was going to say Democrats are insurrectionists on this matter. They literally are trying to create the kind of chaos that will destroy the country, as I talk about. I mean, I will be in total support of Donald Trump bringing in the Insurrection Act. Listen, I don't like these special authorities or extreme measures that have to be taken in government, but we put such laws on the books for serious situations. And this has gone way beyond a policy disagreement between Republicans and Democrats. That's one thing. We could talk about the policy and what we want to do. That is an issue that always, we've done in this country. But when you look at the specific reactions of Tim Walz and Jacob Fry, not just in the short term of what's happening right now, but in the long term, what their stated and purposeful policies have been, it is insurrectionist in nature. It literally is an attempt to create the kind of chaos that destroys the fabric of the American Republic. That is their specific goal. And for some Democrats, it's their stated goal.
Yeah, exactly. If they would just work with President Trump and work with the administration to stop these people who are committing crimes on the streets, then he wouldn't have to use the Insurrection Act. But they're not working together. They don't want to. They want this to go on. And
yeah, it's not their intention.
And another thing that probably is motivating Tim Walz, as Kristi Noem said on Fox News today, it's a good distraction from the fraud that's going on. Here's what she had to say on Fox this morning.
Greatest fraud in American history happening right under his nose, and he didn't just allow it to happen. We believe, from all indications, that he was complicit in it, that he knew all about this Somalian fraud that was happening, stealing from government programs and taking dollars away from the most vulnerable individuals in this country and putting it in their pockets to make them rich. So he had this fraud going on for many years. He'd love to change the conversation, trying to demonize our ICE officers, but we're not going to. We are there. We're doubling down in Minneapolis to get to the bottom of this fraud, to make sure we bring perpetrators to justice, and to make sure that we're doing the right thing and bringing safety to the streets. These riots are creating great cover for Tim Walz not being asked about it, because all the media is talking about the riots and not the fraud that's taking place that he's complicit in.
Yeah, it's absolutely criminal what they're doing, honestly, in so many ways. I mean, some of it's not precisely criminal. There are criminal behaviors that have been taking place. Tom Emmer, the House Majority Whip, is apparently receiving affidavits from the workers in Minnesota government who have been exposing this. As you recall from recent hearings, it's reported that 1,000 or more Minnesota government employees, which, keep in mind, are probably all DFL members, but essentially the Democrat Party in Minnesota, and they're still calling out this fraud. They apparently have affidavits of people who say specifically that Tim Walz was, by their observation in his presence, was denying any kind of investigation into any of this. But there's a reason for that. There's an entire system of fraud, not just this particular scope of fraud that we're hearing about in Minnesota, that has been designed since the Obama administration to move American taxpayer money into political efforts for the purpose of securing Democrats to have a regular lock on power in perpetuity. These are institutionalized efforts to build political efforts in support of Democrats. Republicans rarely find themselves on the side of this NGO money when it comes to the political issues of it. Rarely. And this has all been a Barack Obama design. Remember, he is the community organizer in chief. And this is community organization. What you're seeing is community organization. This goes back to Saul Alinsky. His purpose in funding his efforts, he didn't go out and ask people to write checks. He went out and threatened businesses who ended up giving them money. They would literally have a shakedown. Particularly, they started with the banks in the 1950s and 60s. They would do a shakedown. They would embarrass them. This is where there was a practice called redlining that did, in some cases, have a very racist component to it. And Saul Alinsky, though, weaponized that problem into a way for him to raise regular money for his efforts in community organizing, because they would go into private meetings with the banks and bank executives and tell them, listen, we're going to embarrass you greatly if you don't write checks to us. That's literally what they did. Well, now they just appropriate it. I mean, this is why what Republicans are doing in Congress right now, not to cut more spending, is absurd, because this is the whole problem. And I know we're going to talk about that in a minute more.
Yep, we got to go to break, but we'll be back here in just a moment. We'll get to that, as well as an announcement by President Trump from the Oval Office today. Be right back in just a moment.
We have a big announcement, folks. It's called Bella Melt. In the first week, you lost 3 pounds on this, right?
That is correct.
Your GLP-1 is a natural hormone that's in every single one of our bodies. And your GLP-1 lets you know if you're full. It's a satiety hormone. So when your GLP is working properly, it does help suppress your appetite as well as reduce those cravings. So what it's going to do best is it's going to reduce your sugar cravings or any other cravings you have in your body. It's going to suppress that appetite. But where Melissa got the most benefit, I think, over the last week was the L-carnitine. The L-carnitine tells your mitochondria, this is where we talked about it before, this is where you produce energy in your cells. It actually tells those mitochondria to burn fat for fuel.
MelissaHouseBG.com just now introducing for the first time Bella Melt with GLP-1 Fast Action.
All right, welcome back from the break. President Trump did an address today from the Oval Office on the great healthcare plan to lower cost and deliver money directly to the American people. It's a 5-minute statement. We'll try to play some of it, and let's see what he had to say.
Today, I'm thrilled to announce my plan to lower healthcare prices for all Americans and truly make healthcare affordable again. We're doing things that nobody's ever been able to do. We're calling it the Great Healthcare Plan. Instead of putting the needs of big corporations and special interests first, our plan finally puts you first and puts more money in your pocket. The government is going to pay the money directly to you. It goes to you, and then you take the money and buy your own health care. Nobody's ever heard of that before, and that's the way it is. The big insurance companies lose, and the people of our country win. This proposal locks in the massive discounts on prescription drugs that my administration is achieving through our most favored nation drug pricing agreement. Now, when you hear about that, for 40 years they've been trying to do it, but they never were able to do it. No other president was able to do it. I got every other country to approve it by the use of tariffs and other things. They all approved it. Nobody else got it. No other president got it. And for the most part, they didn't even try because they felt it was impossible. It'll bring down drug prices 80, 90%, in some cases, just numbers that nobody's ever heard of before. Your prescription drugs will come way, way down. And under this policy, the prices of many drugs will be slashed by 300, 400, and even 500% starting this month at the TrumpRx.gov. So instead of Americans paying the highest drug prices in the world, which we have for decades, we will now be paying the lowest cost paid by any other nation. So any other nation that's paying the lowest cost, that's what we're going to pay. And the American people will get the savings. So I have to reiterate, the lowest price in the world is what you're going to pay. Before, you were paying the highest price in the world by far, and the politicians did nothing about it. So I'm asking Congress to complete the work that we've started. Next, my plan would reduce your insurance premiums by stopping government payoffs to big insurance companies and sending that money directly to the people. Obamacare was designed to make insurance companies rich. I call it the Unaffordable Care Act, with billions of dollars in taxpayer subsidies that helped their stock prices skyrocket over 1,700% as you paid more money for health care every single year, more and more. The premiums went higher and higher. I want to end this flagrant scam and put extra money straight into the healthcare savings account in your name, and you go out and buy your own healthcare, and you'll make a great deal. You get better healthcare for less money. That way you can choose the care that is right for your family. To further reduce insurance premiums, my plan ends the giant kickbacks to insurance brokers and corporate middlemen that only drive up the costs, and that's what they're intended to do, drive up the cost. But we're driving down the costs. And it fully funds a long neglected part of the law known as the Cost Sharing Reduction Program. This measure alone should cut premiums on the most popular Obamacare plans. It's hard to believe there are any because it's a hated program. It's unaffordable, but it's going to cut them by an average of 10 to 15%. Next, the Great Healthcare Plan. That's the name. It's called the Great Healthcare because it's great healthcare at a lower price. Mandates unprecedented accountability and transparency from insurance companies and all healthcare providers so that special interests can no longer profiteer at your expense. As the saying goes, sunlight is the best disinfectant. That is why my plan orders all insurance companies to publish rate and coverage comparisons in very plain English. It requires insurers to publish detailed information about how much of your money they're going to be paying out in claims versus how much they're taking in profits. In other words, you will be able to watch the scam. It forces them to release detailed data on how many claims are being denied and whether those denials are eventually overturned on appeal. And most importantly, it will require any hospital or insurer who accepts Medicare or Medicaid to prominently post all prices at their place of business so that you are never surprised and you can easily shop for a better deal or better care. And you're going to end up doing both. You're going to get a better deal and better care. We will have maximum price transparency and costs will come down incredibly. I'm calling on Congress to pass this framework into law without delay. Have to do it right now so that we can get immediate relief to the American people, the people I love. Thank you very much.
All right, Jim, what do you think? Is that's the first you're hearing of that?
Actually, I was on the Hill this week meeting with a lot of members of Congress on healthcare. One of the best ways to do price transparency is to have providers reveal the way that they actually set their prices, which is they set it as Medicare costs are the 100% baseline cost. And every medical provider sets their prices as a percent of Medicare cost. It's that simple. It'd be even a lot simpler. But everything that he's talking about is exactly what does need to be done. A lot of people don't know this, but Obamacare, one of the reasons these subsidies had to come in is the insurance providers are allowed to keep a specific percent of what they bring in as a guarantee. This is how they could get insurance companies to come on board when they were going to require them to cover pre-existing conditions. The whole Obamacare thing is a scam. The money is wrong. It's government directed and controlled. And that's why you have so much efficiency and so much high cost. The American people and the American healthcare industry can, if we ever let the free market run it, they could deliver healthcare at very inexpensive prices with the best technologies and skill sets of treating the worst diseases than any country in the world if we would just allow the market to drive this. That does not exist. Donald Trump is attempting to move away from this government-controlled monstrosity of Obamacare. So, I agree with every principle that he states. We just got to get some of the policy right. So we'll see what happens. But I'll be spending a lot of time of that from the conservative caucus dealing with this.
Yeah, and we'll see how fast Congress can get it through and passed, right?
Yep,
right.
Absolutely.
Well, speaking of Congress, you put out this tweet last night. This is one of the most obvious yes votes in legislative history, yet 81 Republicans voted against it. And they voted to fund NED. What is NED, Jim?
It's the National Endowment for Democracy. And the National Endowment for Democracy is the central censorship effort worldwide. Everything that happens in censorship around the world that's coordinated by governments, the NED is involved in it in some way or another. They are the central team in the censorship industrial complex that attempted to take down conservatives and did take down Donald Trump and other key figures from even speaking publicly on social media. This is a major, major problem. These 81 Republicans that voted for this are literally insane. I mean, this is the thing that almost kept Republicans from ever being able to have any control of anything politically again in the future. The absurdity of doing this, I don't even know how to account for it. Republicans are stupid sometimes.
Is it that they're stupid, or is it that is there any other explanation for this other than that they're compromised, paid, or one of the above?
In this case, what's happening in Republican ranks, there probably are some people who are very evil in this regard. Don't forget, the censorship industrial complex is built off of the schemes of controlling what happens in other governments during the Cold War, and then also to a certain degree in the war on terror, and trying to deal with governments that might be positive towards terrorists. And they just took all those methodologies and brought them here locally. So there are going to be some of those Republicans that are neocons who believe in the structure of the deep state that exists in our intelligence community. So there's some of that, but a whole lot of it is just being stupid and overreacting to Donald Trump trying to cut government, because they probably disagree with that as well too. That's a lot of what's behind all this, in my opinion.
Well, this isn't the only one that they voted on last night. There was also Chip Roy offered an amendment to defund the staff budgets for Judge Boasberg and Boardman, two of the most rogue leftist judges in federal courts, and 46 Republicans voted with the Democrats to stop it. Why?
Yeah, go ahead.
The Democrats are always on board. They all vote together. They're unified, and the Republicans are not at all.
Well, part of that is the nature of conservative politics is such that there's at least a sense that you think individualistically. Okay, so that's a little bit of the problem. But the bigger part of the problem is that you have so many Republicans that are so afraid to take actions to break up status quo problems. That's why Donald Trump has had resistance in the Republican Party, is because he's obviously in there to break up the status quo. The Republicans are very scared to change the structure of the federal judiciary. But in reality, the Constitution provides for a Supreme Court of the United States, and there were no other courts established in the Constitution, except that the Constitution says that any other courts of jurisdiction that Congress can create. So Boasberg's seat and every other judge in the appellate courts or in the circuit courts, those were created by Congress, and their money can be withdrawn, and those same jurisdictions can be restructured or eliminated entirely. And Republicans should be doing this, because the courts right now, the lack of justice in this country is so severe that we have to radically shut these things down. Boasberg is the most obvious example of hundreds. And if we don't get on top of it, if Congress is not going to have the will to do it, particularly with Republicans in power, then we are going to have these odd Supreme Court these odd lower court decisions that they're just shutting down what the president can do and other things that Congress even has passed. So this is a serious issue, and it's absurd that 46 Republicans voted against this. It's an obvious one.
Yep. Well, we have one good vote coming out of Capitol Hill last night, at least. A war powers resolution meant to limit President Donald J. Trump's ability to carry out further hostile military action against Venezuela was killed in the Senate by a vote of 51-50. So J.D. Vance had to get up there and break the tie to kill this resolution.
Yeah, and listen, I believe we need to assert that war powers originate in Congress. Okay, they do not originate in the executive branch. So we have to always be very careful that we don't go out with these expeditionary efforts to overtake countries just because we don't like them. That said, there's real evil that takes place in these countries, and we need to have assertive efforts to do this. So I think Congress also needs to grant power where it's necessary, because we have serious threats taking place. But anyway, listen, Donald Trump didn't violate war powers in what he did in Venezuela. He actually followed what is well-established law, and he is not a warmonger. So this was actually a good vote, and I'm glad that J.D. Vance was able to get rid of the tie, because I might have thought that too many Republicans would have been there and he couldn't have stopped it. So I think that it's appropriate to have stopped that, and Donald Trump's taken the right action as it relates to Venezuela by and large.
Yep. Well, we're all out of time for today. Jim, get back in the inside out of the windy cold, and have a great weekend there in D.C.
We'll see you next week, Logan.
Thank you. Take care.
I was born in Iran, and before I was a Christian, I was born into a Muslim country, a Muslim family. And in 1979, when there was a coup that happened in Iran, one of the first things that happened was those who commit a coup, there's a media blackout. And during the time of a media blackout is when they began to kill off their political enemies, or their opponents, I should say, a better way. When I became a Christian 25 years ago and started speaking out about my background and about Christ, about Islam, there were some opportunities, but the bolder you get and the more things were going on, the less doors were opening. And I had many times where we were uninvited, not allowed, kicked out of events because of what we spoke on. I share all of that to say about 10 years ago when I met Brannon and I was introduced to Worldview Weekend, and then I've come and spoken at the Worldview Weekend conferences, I began to see someone who was kindred in the desire to speak the truth in love, no matter what the cost. And how many of us know that as the days get further along and we get more into the last days, how many of us know there's a greater cost? The cost is getting greater to be truth speakers. And the avenues to be truth speakers is getting fewer. So that means that those who are going to be truth speakers are that much more precious, that much more valuable, and must be supported. There's two words that I think of with Brannon besides our common height. But number one, there's courage. What I appreciate about Brannon is that he's always been courageous to do the right thing and to speak the right things. We've seen that in practicality on the road as well, because he has taken his message not only on the air, but on the road. In 2017, when we had a conference that we were both at in South Dakota, a heavily armed Muslim man came in and threatened that conference. That didn't stop Brannon from speaking. I've had that happen in other conferences where I've other ministries where I've spoken and there's been threats and I've never gotten invited back. Brannon never wavered on that commitment. And there was a platform there to speak those truths on this network, on Worldview Weekend, on Worldview Radio, of course now with Worldview Tube. So courage is critical. Number two, integrity. I have seen Brannon time and time again in conversations turn away from opportunities that could have bolstered him, maybe somehow bolstered the network in the immediate, but it was going to be a compromise of the values of Worldview Weekend, of the values of Worldview Foundation, of the values that he holds in his heart to Christ. And he's walked away from those opportunities because of integrity. And that's a rare thing, especially today when so many will self-censor themselves for the sake of, well, I don't want to lose my platform. He's never been afraid of putting the platform on the altar of God in order to do what is right. And I've always admired that, and it has been an encouragement to me to continue on the journey. And he has given our ministry a platform that it is, again, shrinking. We definitely have a shrinking platform. The opportunities are getting narrower, but we're so grateful for Worldview Weekend and Worldview Tube now, especially with Worldview Tube, where he is producing my show and giving me a platform, giving this ministry a voice where that voice is not there. And like Dr. Woods was saying earlier, so many people will say to us, will email us, contact us, see us at events and say, I saw you on with Brannon. I appreciate when you're on with Brannon. So I'm grateful that the Lord connected us. I'm grateful for the opportunity. Courage is fleeting in these days. And integrity, particularly to Christ, is fleeting in those days. And I agree with our earlier speakers that the uniqueness as a pastor, there's not very many places that I can go and talk about geopolitics and talk about national security as I do, but yet bring it back to the gospel, bring it back to the Word of God, because the moment you say Jesus, oh, we don't want to hear from you. Worldview Weekend, Worldview Tube, Worldview Radio, Worldview Foundation gives me and this ministry the platform to do that, to come and bring that perspective of geopolitical, national security, and all those things, but yet bring it always back to the Word of God and make sure that God's people have a biblical worldview. So I pray that you will prayerfully consider not just praying, but again, financially supporting this foundation and make sure that for as long as we have an opportunity, because the day will come, like in Iran, where they will try to black out the opportunity for us to speak. And we will then be in the dark as far as our voice. Of course, we'll never be in the dark with the Lord. But until that day, we must support a ministry like this so that we make sure that we continue to speak the truth in love.
Tonight on the Worldview Report, President Trump says there will be no U.S. attack on Iran after receiving word that the regime has, quote, stopped killing protesters, end quote. Iran reopens its skies after a short-lived airspace shutdown as instability continues and the situation develops hour by hour. Doctors in Tehran reportedly say Iranian security forces are intentionally shooting protesters in the eyes and head. Minneapolis officials are investigating reports of another shooting involving federal agents following days of unrest linked to immigration enforcement activity. Zero Hedge reports left-wing chaos continued in Minneapolis as federal vehicles were looted. And the New York Times reports that major banks have posted strong earnings, including Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan. Australia moves to criminalize criticism of Islam in response to a jihad massacre. That's according to Jihad Watch. And Justice Samuel Alito presses an ACLU attorney to define man and woman. And Colorado Democrats, they introduce a bill that critics say could strip parents of rights regarding gender transition for children. And then in the Worldview commentary tonight, the myth of a self-financed Fed. All this and more as the Worldview Report begins right now.
This is Worldview Report with host Brandon House. Whether it is news from the nation's capital or your state capital, from the classroom to the boardroom, from national security to national and local news that impacts you and your family, Worldview Report is your trusted source for vital and uncensored news. And now, here is Brandon House.
Good evening and welcome to the Worldview Report. We begin tonight with the developments concerning Iran and U.S. posture toward potential military action. The New York Times is reporting that Benjamin Netanyahu and some Arab nations asked President Trump to hold off on striking Iran. We'll continue to follow that and develop that story as more information comes out. Jihad Watch reports that President Trump says there will be no more U.S. attacks on Iran because he received information that Iran's regime had, quote, stopped killing protesters, end quote. The report is published under the Jihad Watch banner, and it frames the announcement as a major shift from earlier warnings of possible retaliation. In the report, Trump is quoted as saying that the regime had stopped killing protesters, and he indicated that based on that information, the United States would not move forward with an immediate strike. This, of course, follows a period of intense uncertainty where international observers have been tracking deadly violence in Iran tied to protests. Of course, there were security crackdowns and reports of executions and mass arrests. Earlier statements from U.S. leadership, it suggested that Iran could face consequences if protesters were killed. This latest claim that the killing has stopped appears to have been presented as justification for pulling back from military action. However, uncertainty remains as independent verification inside Iran has been difficult due to heavy information control and, of course, media restrictions and disruption